Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Joseph Ryder Anderson podcast. Today, we are going to be talking about a lot of things. I know it's been a little bit, but we're going to go ahead and talk about what's new. We're going to talk about what's new in the Union Arena world. There's some very important things to talk about that are coming up. We're going to be talking about the new set that's coming out at the end of the month, which may end up being, in terms of popularity, one of the biggest Union Arena sets to date, and that is the Goddess of Victory NIKKE set. So we're going to be talking about that, and we're going to be talking about the current meta and where we're at now post Kenshin, post Bleach new card selection decks, and post Kaiju. So, you know what, to start things out, let's talk about the biggest news. That I was just at a rare battle for Kenshin last night. I got second place with Hiko. But I was just talking with some friends about the Las Vegas Championships. So that has been officially announced. We've been waiting for this. And the coolest thing is there is going to be a last chance qualifier the day before the final championship. So the last chance qualifier is what it sounds like. It's your last chance to get into the North American Championships. And it's you can kind of think of it as like essentially like a regional that takes place a day before the North American Championship. So if you have not had a chance to go to a regional and this is somewhat close to you and it's handy to go to one, this could be a great experience for you to go and check it out. I think it's going to be a ton of fun, so I'm excited about it. That's the main thing I want to talk about. I felt like there was something else and I'm blanking on what it was news-wise, but whatever. If I remember, we'll talk about it. I also want to get into Kaiju a bit more. So I did do my last video on the Kaiju decks, and they are super cool, and I've been playing with them a ton. So I do want to go over the Mina deck. I've been kind of going through different iterations. I wrote an article on this, but I did want to go and take a look at my rare battle winning Mina deck. So I had a ton of fun. I was a little bit grumpy because I had to like drive a bit to get to this rare battle. It wasn't super far, but it was it was during Friday weekend traffic. So on my way there, I was a little bit grumpy, but when I got there, I was super glad I went. The Kaiju rare battle is the most fun I've had at a rare battle since probably the Sword Art Online days. If anybody has been following me that long, you may remember I got super into Sword Art Online and went undefeated 2 out of 3 of the rare battles I went to for that. And then Kaiju, I went to my first Kaiju tournament and won playing my favorite Kaiju deck, which is the Mina deck. And I absolutely think that Mina is top tier. I think a lot of people are. Oh, and I just remembered what it was I wanted to talk about, the other thing, which was the Eggman tournament. So we'll see if we have time for that. There was a little bit of a decent sized tournament. The Eggman tournament was about 25 players or so. It was a quad box tournament. But anyways, getting back to Mina, I do think Mina is absolutely top tier. There was a Kikaru deck which did do really well in the Eggman tournament, but it was just one. And the thing about Kikaru is that she is certainly a solid deck, and she can definitely take your opponent by surprise. But I think that she falls off a little bit as you get toward the middle game and later. So if you don't get that burst early on and your opponent gets what they need, it's going to be a little tough to win with Kikaru, whereas Mina has the early game aggression and the late game plays and attacks from the energy line. She's only missing a few pieces and she'd be even stronger. So I think Mina is a very, very cool deck. And let's go over mine. So I did take Mina out for the first time to like a 12-player tournament locally. Played some great games against some great people there. And I did win that tournament undefeated with Mina. I did make some changes by the time I got to the rare battle. Primarily, I got 2 more Renos. I was lucky to get 2 more Renos so I could build the full build with the Reno. And I do think, as much as I like the 4-cost Soshiro and I like some of the plays with the 2-cost Soshiro, Reno is just so good, especially at enabling that early game play, that you really want to go Mina Reno. This is a deck that's been doing well in Japan, so I figured it would do well here, and it is a very solid deck because you have the combo of really it's a hard to beat early game play when you go into the Reno, into the 3-cost Bako, push up an attacker, you can play the Bako for free, push up an attacker. It's just a really, really strong aggro play into the Mina who can shut things down. And again, the key thing about the Mina to keep in mind, she reminds me a lot of Mustang in terms of her why she's so good, and that is that she can keep forcing peak cards to stay resting turn after turn. So you do have effects that can rest. You have the 3-cost Mina. When you play her, you can rest a character. You have your color trigger, which can rest opposing characters. And then, of course, there's the Mina that when you play her, she rests a character. So you can go into this strategy even harder with the 2-cost Zushiro if you want, but I have found the 1-cost Reno, 1-cost Mina the way to go on your lower cost characters. It just helps improve consistency, and really you want to be playing into that Reno play, because if you can get that Reno play, in the rare battle that I played, I was able to get my opponent down to like 2 or 3 life in one battle because of that Reno play. And then in the other tournament I played against Mustang, I played against the blue Mustang, was able to just get way ahead faster than they were able to. So I of the decks that are not just pure aggro, for a mid-range deck, which is what Mina is, I think Mina has the best early game aggro of any deck. So I would definitely look into Mina. Certainly a top tier pick post Kaiju, which is great. I think a lot of people were saying that Kaiju wasn't super strong, so I'm glad to see that Kaiju is pretty strong. And there's other decks too that are interesting. We've already talked about that quite a bit, but I did struggle a bit against the green Kaiju. I bricked a little bit, and green Kaiju can do some nasty things when it comes out and comes online. So that deck is also pretty strong. So again, I'll share a link to the article about the more in-depth tournament matchups and things like that from the rare battle. But definitely, if you can go to a Kaiju 8 rare battle, I highly recommend it. It's the most fun I've had at a rare battle in months. So it's great to see that. So moving on, let's talk about the other thing I want to talk about, which is this Eggman tournament. A lot of people are talking about this Eggman tournament, and it was really an interesting change up. I do want to preface this with the fact that there was just 27 players listed here, 27 players. So it's not like anywhere near definitive data that I think a lot of people are going to look at this and see, oh, no red Kenshin in the top 8. I think that is a good indicator of a healing meta, but it's not definitive, right? If you were to go and look at a regional, assuming they don't do some kind of a pair ban, but if you were to look at a regional right now, if a regional happened right now, I'm sure there would be more red Kenshins. But in this particular tournament, the top 8, there wasn't a single red Kenshin. So, and I think that's largely thanks to just how strong the new Bleach card selection is. It's really baffling how powerful those decks have become, especially Toshiro and Byakuya. So I can't remember if I talked about this already, but I did play, I don't think I did talk about this, but I played a Toshiro. I did talk about this in one of the past videos I did. But anyways, there was a Toshiro deck that I played. I will share a link to that. I played that at a case tournament and got tied for second place with that Toshiro deck. And then I did end up building a Byakuya deck that differs a bit from the top placing Byakuya deck from the Eggman tournament and the GG Haven and Eggman tournament. But the Byakuya deck I played, I was pretty astounded with how strong it was. I'll share both. We can kind of take a look at both of those. The one I played, and then there was definitely some improvements. I think the one from the Eggman tournament, if we look at it, did not run the, what's his name, Kisuke? The 1-cost Kisuke. I think it's tempting to want to try to run the 1-cost Kisuke because he is new and interesting, but I agree with this player's decision to drop the Kisuke. I might tech in. I like that 2-cost Byakuya. I personally would run the 0-cost Byakuya. But I do like that the idea of running that 2-cost Byakuya. So in my list, I'd probably swap out the Kisuke for the Byakuya. And then otherwise, he's running 8 double energy gen, which is plenty for this deck. So yeah, that new Renji is the real differentiator for Byakuya. The fact that he can come in and switch to active so easily really changes the way this deck feels to play. It's very easy to get a really strong front line of attackers out there, and you don't have to overextend your energy line to do that. As well as the 1-cost Byakuya is pretty insane. The fact that you can play him, look at the top 3, discard up to 1 of those, and then kind of you're basically can prep the cards you're going to get. You can control the next cards you're going to get, which just brings a lot of consistency to this deck. So definitely look out for the Byakuya deck. I would not be surprised after seeing this tournament result, after playing it myself to that first place finish, I would not be surprised to see Byakuya become the preferred purple deck for a while. As strong as Renji Rush is, I personally prefer this new and upgraded Byakuya build over the Renji Rush Volume 2 style deck. So crazy to see these decks. Again, I've already talked about Toshiro, but maybe I should go dig that up and talk about Toshiro some more. The thing is about Toshiro, that deck is just so strong. And I think maybe after this Eggman tournament, people are paying attention to that. people might start to realize and wake up to how strong this deck is. It was already pretty strong before the new card selection. But this deck, I piloted this deck again at that case tournament. 20 plus players. I'm not exactly sure how many there were. It was probably similar to that Eggman tournament. Got top 8. Well, actually top 5. And only lost to Kenshin off of I had a kind of a bummer hand, and he had like everything he needed for an aggro play. So got ahead of me, but otherwise did not lose a single battle from that tournament. And there's a reason why this deck is just so strong. So my build, again, is leaning heavier into the Kenpachi. I like having that Yachiro to easily get into the discard, so you can use Nazarashi whenever. I'm running the 2-cost Shinsui at 4, which gives a lot of consistency to this deck. And that 1-cost Toshiro, do not underestimate him. He can be really strong in the right circumstances. Let's go take a look at the deck that did well at the Eggman, got 4th. Let's take a look at what this guy's doing here. So we have the Shinji. A lot of people are really liking this Shinji, and I definitely think that the Shinji makes sense, especially if you're going to go more with the Toshiro. So if you're going to go with the Toshiro special and you're not going with the Nazarashi play, that 1-cost Shinji does add a lot of consistency to this deck. However, they are running the Ikkaku at just 2, so I don't know about that. I like the idea of running the 4 Ikkaku. And then maybe you could run a couple Shinji. I don't think you need the Shinji, but again, he is really strong, so it's not a bad thing to run the Shinji. And definitely in this build, I would make room for him because you don't really need the Yachiro in this build. One interesting thing here is he is running the Kenpachi at 4, the 4-cost Kenpachi at 4. So he's running less of the 2-action cost Kenpachi. I like to run 4 of the 2 AP cost Kenpachi right now because that can't be moved into the Kenshin is really strong. But this player is running the 4 as basically a raidless Kenpachi attacker that you can then raid over with really powerful raid Kenpachi and make him really strong. And then they're also running the 1-cost Toshiro at 4, which makes sense because this Toshiro is really strong. You can bring back a Toshiro from a raid from your discard as long as you have, or from your sideline as long as you have 6 cards on the field other than him. So very, very solid. But yeah, this deck, I see, he's running only 2 Bankais. That could be, that's interesting. Definitely, people are really testing this out these days, running less Bankai, which is interesting. Just take that as you will. I always run 4 Bankai personally, 4 final triggers, AP extends in general, but give that a try and see if it works for you. So that's kind of it on the decks to go over. I guess we could look at this Kikaru deck from the tournament. Kikaru is definitely an interesting deck. I personally am not the biggest fan of Kikaru. I don't like that it goes so hard and fizzles out. It really puts a lot of pressure on that early game play, and you have to do it just right to get there. I prefer more mid-range style decks. Mid-range are kind of my favorite in general, or some control like Goddesses. I do play a lot of Goddesses, and the Goddesses is definitely more mid-range to control, probably more on the control side. But this deck is interesting. I did like that this player was running the Defense Forces base. I love that card, and I'm so happy to see that other people are using that and having success with that because I think that's really strong. Not going too crazy on the 3-cost Reno, 3-cost Iharu. You already have a lot of great 3-cost characters, so it's not really a huge need to. I do like the 0-cost Nullify Impact, and then the 0-cost Active Trigger to grant a little added BP can be huge into this deck where you have a lot of characters around 3,500 BP. Giving them that extra 500 BP, getting them up to a 4,000 attacker just seems like a wise thing to do, as well as bringing in a couple more active triggers. So this brings you up to just 4 active triggers, which isn't a ton, but it's better than nothing, so it's nice to see. Really cool. I like the Kikaru strategy, but again, that hyper aggro, it's either your thing or it's not. I prefer more of the mid-range style decks, but it's not because they're better. It's just because that's my preference. So definitely give Kikaru a try if you're eager to try that one out. And it was nice to see Toto coming back. Let's take a look at this Toto deck. Toto, not much different here. It looks like a pretty standard Toto list to me. This Goodwill event, and it's kind of funny that I'm pointing out the Goodwill event, but the Goodwill event to me, here's something interesting. Oh, no, same thing. No, I'm sorry. Take back what I said. Go back to Goodwill event. But the Goodwill event is really strong. I can't believe that card is I feel like Goodwill event should be banned. But it's just way too strong. I'm like, you can add a character from your sideline to your hand and then play that character for free. Like, what? It just seems way too strong in Toto. So I would like it that as a non-Toto player and somebody plays against Toto, I would like if there was no Goodwill event, but I guess that helps Toto stay in contention for top deck. So very, very cool to see that. So we've gone over a lot of things here. We've gone over all of the different stuff I wanted to go over, but there's something really big that we haven't gone over, and that is the upcoming Nikke set. So I've been doing a bit of work on the website, so definitely go and check it out. I have the full Nikke card list. So that's the full card list in the English, is on the Nikke, is on the website. So definitely make sure to check that out. .com. It's over there in the Union Arena section of the blog. So but let's go ahead and talk about the decks that are coming out. So Nikke is going to be a big set for fans of Nikke. It's also going to probably be a really fun rare battle format. So you kind of want to go into this. There are definitely some competitive decks, but I think the really fun thing for most is going to be the rare battle format and then the collecting the cards. But the decks that stand out to me the most by far, there's the yellow. It looks really cool. I really like the yellow. I think it's called Yellow Counters. This one's with Modernia. The Modernia card is just a really beautiful card. The SR triple star is gorgeous, and then this card is also really pretty. This 5 cost, but I really like the Modernia. So she's kind of like a baby Mustang. So when she's attacking, you can do some stuff to very similar effect as Mustang. It has like a baseline sideline of 1,000 or less, but you can extend that by placing any number of event cards from your hand to the outside area. So again, it's limited to event cards, but that's still really cool. And when you play her, you can bring back some memory events from your sideline to your hand. So Modernia is a really cool character. I think that she could be really fun to mess around with. You have also a lot of cards that help you search out events in this deck. You have cards that I really like. This 4-cost Neon that gets damage 2 if you've just played an event this turn. So that having a 4,000 BP damage 2 attacker that easily is really strong. And then you have the Anis for some added draw support, impact negate, double block, really solid defensive character, and this Marianne that lets you like the top 7 of your deck and bring a memory to hand. So this deck is all about using those memory cards, and the memory card lets you draw, so it's actually kind of strong too. And it's all about like recycling those memories to unlock, especially the Modernia's powerful effect. So I think this will probably be the strongest, the yellow, and actually I could see this one faring pretty well. I don't know if I wouldn't probably call it S tier, but I think in the English version you could call it A tier. I think it could definitely get up into the A tier. I think another deck that's doing decently in Japan that could do well here is that purple Pilgrim Inherit deck. So this is the one with the Dorothy. So if you've been collecting those Dorothys like I have from the store championship or store tournaments, you're going to be able to put those winner cards into this deck. This deck has a really unique mechanic, perhaps the most unique mechanic in Union Arena to date, and that is one that focuses on not having trigger cards on your field. So you gain effects from not having any trigger cards on your field, and you also can punish your opponent for them having cards with triggers on their field. And then you have additional card effects that let you basically take advantage of the fact that you have no triggers coming out of life. There's some different cards in here that help you draw and get to hand and things like that kind of make it more worth your time running triggerless. So I think that's really cool. The 5-cost Dorothy is really interesting. Very powerful removal effect via the 5-cost Dorothy. So I definitely could see this one doing well in the lower A tier, higher B tier. And then there's a bit of actually the Pioneer deck. Sorry, before I go off of that, I personally like the purple Pioneer deck. I think this is probably the one I'm going to build. It has this really cool Modernia that can pretty easily sideline things. You have a lot of characters that reduce BP, and then you can play the Modernia, the 4-cost Raid Modernia, to sideline them. And then you have this Snow White character which has the color trigger, so you're going to be running 4 of her. And you discard 2, and you can choose one character in your opponent's area, and loses all of its original effects until the start of your next turn. So that's a great way to shut off like a lot of things. It's a great way to shut off a lot of things. I really like that. And then when attacking, if you have 2 less cards in hand, you draw a card. This deck is really focused on thinning out your hand to gain additional benefits. So that's one of the key things of the purple Pioneer deck. Moving on from then to me, there's a bit of a drop off in power right past the purple Pioneer deck. You get into this, the next deck up that's somewhat strong is this green Bacillus deck. And this deck is okay. It's really just looking to fill up your board with a bunch of 4,000 BP attackers. You do have this 5-cost Laplace that does gain damage too, and does help you can push a character back to the energy line when she's played. So it's like that, the Kenshin with impact. So that's definitely not a bad card. And the goal here is really just to fill up your front line with a bunch of 4,000 BP attackers and just swing through. That's not really a bad thing, right? But the only negative thing is you don't have like a ton of like natural 4,000 BP. You have a couple, and then you're boosting a bunch of others. So it's definitely an interesting play. It's very straightforward and definitely has some aggro potential with this Alice raid that she lets you play characters pretty easily. So there's some aggro and like it's a kind of like an aggro to mid-range style deck. I think on the negative side, it doesn't really have any removal to speak of, so that's a bit of a bummer. So I think it's an interesting deck. I think you could definitely win some tournaments with that deck, but it does lack some of what the other Nikke decks have going for them. And then moving on, which is a really interesting deck, which is the Yellow Exotic Wardress deck. This one's super aggro. This is a super aggro deck that sort of like the counterpart to yellow, super aggro. You have this Viper, play one character card with BP 3 to 500 less and AP cost from your hand to set to your area active. Gives you some ability so you can play the Viper and then play another character, and then you can rest her and then rest one active character on your front line. So that's another thing too about this deck, is that it's all about resting your own characters in the front line to unlock additional effects. So like the Uni, you may rest on play when you raid the Uni. You may rest one active character on your front line. If you did, draw one card, and all characters in your opponent's front line with BP 1000 or more get minus 500. So the point here is to really make it hard for your opponent to stop your aggro attacks. They're not going to be blocking you as long as you can get Uni out, right? Unless if they have a bunch of really, really strong characters. One on the front line, choose one character in your front line and one character in your energy line and switch their positions so that you can rest a character and then swap them out. Then you have this 4-cost Jackal, 3,500 BP, but once per turn, she can, if it just can only be activated if this character is on your front line, is rested by your own card effect, so set this character active. So you can use Uni onto the Jackal and switch her to active. And the goal here is really just to get a bunch of characters on the front line, and then lower their BP so you can swing through them. A hyper aggro strategy, not the best one we've seen. We were just talking about the Kikaru strategy, and definitely the Kikaru is the stronger of the two yellow aggro decks. But I think this is still could be a fun deck with some interesting mechanics, especially around that switching your own frontline characters to resting to gain benefits. And then we have another aggro deck, which is the Tetra line aggro deck. This one's interesting because this is one of those decks that's you're putting cards underneath your characters to unlock abilities. And based on what you do, based on how many of those cards you have under a character, you can unlock some interesting effects. So like this 4-cost Alice, she lets you look at the top 4 cards of your deck and play up to one character with required energy of 2 or less. And this plays really well into that whole aggro strategy, right? You don't need to pull get a bunch of really, really strong characters in your field. You're just trying to get the lower level ones, the lower cost ones, and go aggro with them. But you can place the remaining at the bottom of your deck in any order. After looking at the deck, you may place a total of 2 face-down cards under characters in your area to the outside area. If you did, it's a card energy of 3 or less instead. So this jumping up to 3 energy costs means you can play some of your really strong characters, such as the 3-cost Alice. And if there's a card under the 3-cost Alice, she gains impact, which is really strong. So yeah, lots of really interesting things here. I do like combining that whole strategy of putting cards under other cards to gain effects, like this Rupee, 3-cost Rupee. You may place a total of 2 face-down cards under characters in your field. To the outside area, if you did, choose up to 1 Tetra line card in your area that was played this turn other than Rupee and set it to active. So you can combo that with the Alice to get even more aggro onto the field. It's not a bad aggro strategy, but again, we just had Kikaru come out, which I think is going to probably be the prime aggro strategy for some time. It doesn't mean that you can't still play and have fun with this green Tetra line deck, but it's still just not going to be quite as strong as that Kikaru. So now that we've kind of taken a brief glance, and I'll go ahead and put a link to this article. You can learn a lot more of these decks via the guide, and I'm also going to have a guide for each one of these decks soon, so you can get really deep and learn more about each one of those decks. I know that we kind of went over them somewhat briefly, but I do think the decks to watch easily, there's 2, and I think potentially 3. I guess, okay, let me restate that. There's a top 4 deck, and the top 2 are the strongest by quite a bit. And those are the counters with Modernia. That repeatable removal effect via Modernia is really strong, and just how much draw you have, how strong your peripheral characters are. I think the yellow looks really well positioned in the current English meta. And then you do have that really interesting purple Pilgrim Inherit deck that's looking to benefit from having triggerless characters. And then the other one, the next two are sort of a step down. So I would say those two, the yellow and the purple Pilgrim. Yellow definitely A tier. So the yellow counters with Modernia is definitely A tier to me. The purple Pilgrim is going to be more like high B, low A. I think it was where that's going to fit in. And then you have the purple Pioneers, probably more of a B tier, high B tier deck. And then the green Bacillus is probably more of a squarely mid B tier deck. And then the other ones are lower. So you want to be paying attention if you're thinking competitively, you're thinking about those top decks from the set. So where are we then? Where are we with the current meta? So we've already gone over where the Nikke decks fit in. But let's talk about the other top tier decks. And actually, let's go over the ones that we haven't already talked about, just in case you may not know what the top tier decks are in Union Arena. You can find them on the website again at josephryderanderson.com. Under the Union Arena decks, you're going to go to top decks. That's like on the drop down. That's going to take you to the current list of best decks. So we've already talked about two of them. We've already talked about Byakuya and Kenpachi. I'd say Byakuya likely will take over the place of Renji Rush, but we'll talk about the rest. So we do have a number one spot. The Red Kenshin is still doing really, really strong things, really, really good things in the meta. It's been vastly prevalent in the last two regionals that we've had, and it's all about being hyper aggro. We have here, this is the deck list that won the Los Angeles Regional by Milo. He is running a bunch of zeros for consistency's sake. That just helps you make sure you can play the game. This 4-cost Yahiko makes a huge difference. He has the active trigger, which is nice, but the fact that you can use him to attack early on, so your opponent can't just freely block. That's a really nice play into the Yahiko. And then the rest of the deck, is pretty much standard Red Kenshin. You have the 4-cost double attacker, which if you get him out early, can be devastating to your opponent. This is where I lose the most to Red Kenshin, is if they get the Red Kenshin out super early. It's just very hard to deal with that if you don't have blockers up. And even if you do have blockers up, he gets right through them most of the time. The starter deck Kenshin is stronger later in the game, where you can clear out, nullify impacts, and then swing for impact, so your opponent can't do much to stop him. And then the 2 action cost Kenshin, some people run him at 2, some people run at 4. He can be really powerful. When you're playing into decks that don't really mind having characters pushed back, you use him so that they don't have the option to get basically a free block. You're using him to shut that down, so you can clear out a board. Very strong. And then the 3-cost Kenshin, super strong. You can play him, switch him to active. Really one of the strongest cards in the game. The fact that he can come in, switch to active very easily, and then has nullify impact at 4,000 BP and all at a 3-cost is really powerful. And then the Kaorus are also really strong. The 3-cost Kaoru lets you draw a card at the end of each turn if you haven't sidelined, which is most of the time that's going to work. So you can just draw a free card every turn. You just got to remember to use her. And then the 2-cost Kaoru is actually deceptively strong, coming in at 2 cost, 2 energy gen. But then being able to protect your strongest Kenshin on the field is really, really strong. Again, she's not actually protecting. She's just making it so your opponent has to discard. But that ends up being a much higher cost than they often will want to pay. And that does harm their strategy a bit to have to pay that cost. Moving on now to the other deck that I want to talk about, which is the Code Geass Green Lancelot. This deck is still definitely top tier. Has had consistent performance pretty much since the beginning of Union Arena, but it did fall off there a bit. But with Volume 2, especially thanks to the Nunnally and the 0-cost Anya, this deck became incredibly strong, with one of the best plays being the Gloucester unit, Cornelia Fighter, raiding that up and then finding a Nunnally off of your top 5 cards and resting her to the back, playing her rest of the back line. Super strong combo. This deck is by Jeremy Eggers, who got top 32 at the LA Regional. Very, very solid list, so definitely check that out. Again, on the website, you can find more about this. And actually, Jeremy wrote an article. It's linked in there, so I'll add that in the description and the show notes. Jeremy wrote a guide to his experience playing at the regional. Renji Rush, I won't talk about this a ton because I do think Byakuya could very well end up taking Renji Rush's place in the meta. We'll see. But Renji Rush has had an insanely consistent run lately. It's been making it into I think at both top of the last regionals top 8s have had Renji Rush. So I wouldn't be surprised to see it again. I think popularity wise, Byakuya might take over, but who knows? Maybe we'll see another Renji Rush getting top 8 at the regional in Florida that's coming up. This deck just continues to be just a really middle of the road deck, having everything you need, very well rounded. That's more what I meant, not middle of the road. More I meant well rounded, with removal, damage 2, plenty of draw, early on draw, and filtering. Just a really, really solid deck. And it can go really fast in the right situation, especially with the Renji. Early on, you can use the Renji to remove and then attack with damage 2. It's just a very, very powerful deck. And it shows just the power of damage 2, right? Damage 2 sort of acts like a removal because your opponent has to block to stop it a lot of times later in the game. So you end up getting a lot of removal that way. Roy Mustang is really nobody needs to introduce Roy Mustang because he has now won 2 regionals. So he is definitely a deck to watch. And I think a lot of people did not see him coming when he came out. I don't think he's actually as strong in the Japanese meta for whatever reason. But the Full Metal Alchemist set did come out a lot later there, so it could be they had a lot of other tools to deal with him by the time he came out. But here in the English meta, he is one of the top decks to beat. And he's just really, really solid. I think his biggest differentiator is the fact that he can sideline cards, use a sideline effect turn after turn. So this is a deck by Something Fresh that won first place at Gen Con. I think a lot of people are now teching in the 4500 BP Louis Armstrong just to have a little bit of a bigger character to block with. But this deck is just really strong as it is. You have tons of early game filtering and draw, and then you have that turn after turn removal, which can be completely deadly if you are able to get it off. So just shows how activate main is actually, or not activate main, but effects that are not when played, right? Like you look at Renji Rush, the 5 cost Ichigo can only remove when played, and that's it. It shows how effects that you can keep using over and over can be really strong in the right situation. It also puts a ton of pressure on your opponent to prioritize removing Roy, as opposed to building up their own board. So it can be like a psychological advantage almost there too. Here is the purple Saito. Purple Saito is deceptively strong. I feel like I've played a lot of Saito myself, and I feel like Saito is a deck that when I play it, it doesn't work as well as it does when other people play it. Because whenever I face this deck, I feel like I barely won. I don't know that I've ever... Okay, other than at the rare battle I went to last night with Hiko of all decks, I managed to aggro down Saito. That's the only time I've ever beaten Saito by a lot. The rest of the times I've either lost to Saito or I've beaten Saito just by a very small, thin margin. This deck has insane consistency, has insane filtering, has insane draw, and has a fake 2 cost that doubles as a 0 cost with 2500 BP that can be a 4000 BP that you can then combo into recycling the 6 cost Hajime Saito, who's one of the strongest closers in the game right now, swinging from the bench. I've been writing about Pokemon too much. From the energy line with 5,000 BP, sniping a character, impact, like one of the strongest closers in the game right now, and probably will be for some time. Just such a strong deck. And it doesn't require a ton of energy to get him going, right? You just have to hit 6 energy on the energy line, and you can start doing some wonderful things. And then we have Sukuna Nanami. Continues to be a really strong deck. I like Sukuna Nanami a lot. I think it's good to have Sukuna Nanami in the meta. Definitely makes opponents think twice about what they're doing. But here you're looking to just hit it's 2 fingers in your sideline to get Sukuna fully powered up. So he's a 5,000 BP attacker with impact. You have plenty of draw. It remains one of the strongest things about Sukuna in general is you have plenty of draw with the Maki, with the 0 cost Nobara, with did I say Sukuna already? He draws 2. You just have a lot of draw that way. And then you're also, the new thing since volume 2 is you're looking to mill your own deck, basically, because you have a couple characters that get a lot stronger. This 2 cost Kento is kind of silly because he only gains BP and nullify impact when you're down to 15 or less cards in your deck, which is kind of crazy. I can see why this player is only running him at 2 and then the Yuji at 3. But you do have this 4 cost Kento Nanami. This is an 8th place deck, by the way, from the Bandai Cardfest Regional. Personally, I like the build that runs the other Raid Nanami too, who gains impact and damage too, but this deck did do really well, so definitely a fair play. And then he's going with the Yuji as opposed to the Kento. I like that that other Kento raid too, the damage boost to damage 2 and impact 1. I really like that he can rest a character, so he's a good like defensive play too, that he can rest a character when he's sidelined. But yeah, try out the different builds for yourself. Having that Yuji to bounce can definitely help you gain some advantage over your opponent. We've already talked about Toto, so we don't need to talk about that a bit more, but he is up there as a more top tier deck, and we talked about Mina. So those are my top picks. So if we look at the list in its entirety, the tier maker, so we do have Blue Mustang is an S tier deck. Saito, Mina is my pick for S tier. We'll see if that pans out. I think it will. She's really strong, and she has been doing pretty well in the Japanese meta. We have Code Geass, Green Lancelot, still really strong. Of course, Red Kenshin. We could be seeing that slipping a little bit, but Kenshin is still really strong. Purple Bleach, that's Renji Rush specifically. I think we'll probably see Byakuya become a bit more popular too, so those two could switch. But we also have Kenpachi Toshiro, definitely S tier, one of the strongest decks in the game right now. So I hope that helps you with figuring out where the meta is at, helps you figure out with how you want to build your decks and how you want to approach things. If you like that, make sure you like and subscribe on YouTube, subscribe on whatever podcast player you're listening to, and don't forget to check out josephryderanderson.com for all of the latest Union Arena content. Until next time, keep on battling.